And welcome everybody. Thank you for coming today. It's so lovely to see all of your faces. I'm just putting you in gallery mode now so I can see you all. I see some people are coming in from Singapore. Aiden's coming in from Tatooine with the dual suns. And we have some more participants coming in as the minutes roll by. I'm curious, what is it about this topic that drew you into this room today? I'd love to hear from a few of you because you had so many choices on sessions to attend. What was it about the science of behavior change that really caught your attention? Just unmute. I'd love to hear your voice and let the group know what kind of called you in.
I
Was it
can
just
start.
totally random? You just
Hi.
randomly clicked the button and now you're here. Hi, Varis.
Hi, Daniel. So I think what draws me to this session is that I took a class on behavioral economics in school. And I think, the science of behavior change is very intriguing, how, everyone's mental models really, affects how you act, how you behave in daily lives, and how we can nudge that, for better society. So that concept interests me very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So we will hope to touch on some behavioral economics stuff by the end of this call. Anyone else? I'm curious to know, why did you choose this session? Why is this interesting for you? Or was it just a random button click to do on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning?
So I'm. Oh.
Hi, Aiden.
Okay, so I'm a teacher, a psychology teacher, and we're currently developing a new course for 14 to 16-year-olds, which includes a lot of things, but part of it would focus on behavioral change. And so it's always good to hear from the experts, what the latest view of that is. Otherwise, we're only listening to Laurie Santos, who's cool, but it's good to have more than one voice in the mix.
Yeah, Laurie's great. I know Laurie very well. And I'm glad to see that they fixed the Wi-Fi situation on Tatooine. Your signal is coming in loud and clear. Namita, I would love to hear from you. Please tell me why you're here.
Hi, I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also a parent to a 13-year-old. So it's always good to hear all kinds of ways in which behavior can change. It's one of my things. And one thing that I'm really interested in doing is to bring therapy to teens without it having the garb of going into a room and becoming a formal way of addressing things. So I'm consciously and always open to the idea of how can this happen without it being so in a room. Why can't it be more fun? Why can't it be something that is accessible to more people? And it's happening without people knowing that it's happening, because we're changing all the time anyways.
Namita, I was just about to put on my white robe and surgical gloves and get out the Freudian couch. So I guess maybe we shouldn't do that.
No, I'm far from that. I mean, Freud left long time ago.
Let's keep it casual then. I agree. That sounds like fun. I'm curious to hear how everybody else is doing. And I know we won't all have time to share, but if everybody could open up their chat window by clicking the little chat button at the bottom, we're going to do what's called a chatterfall. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but it's a way for us all to get to know each other very fast in 1 second. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll ask you to type in the answer to that question in the message box, but don't click send until I say go. Some of you may not have heard that instruction, and that's okay. You're going to send it off before everybody else does. But for those of you who are paying attention, you'll write the message, and then when I say go, everyone will click send at the same time, and we'll see what everyone's responses are. And my question today is, how are you feeling right now in this moment? If you were to check in with your body, with your mind, with your emotions, pick a few words that describe how you're feeling and write it in the message box so we can get a sense of the climate for the room today. And I'll give you maybe 3 or 4 seconds to do that. Think of a few really good words that describe how you're feeling right now. And then on the count of 3, I'm going to say go. And then we're all going to click send at the same time. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. And there's our chatterfall. We have people who are excited, pumped, curious, thankful. We've got a lot of excited, actually, caffeinated, which is probably where the excitement's coming from. Glad that someone made time for this. We're tired, but also very excited. So I love the excited word. Anticipating, that's a great word. And Jessica just woke up. So Jessica, hopefully we'll get you wide awake by the end of this call. Maybe whoever's drinking coffee can send you a little shot of espresso. So what I'm going to do is share my screen so we can get our session rolling. I do this really cool and interesting course, or at least I think it's cool. It's probably on the nerdy side. It's called the Science of Wellbeing, and I run this for organizations and other large groups. And it's based on the best of positive psychology, and it takes positive psychology and distills it down into really easy, manageable chunks that you can use to make your life a little bit better. So at the end of this 90 minutes, if you feel like you have some tools and strategies to make your life a little bit better, even if it's a small change, then I've succeeded. So let's dive in together, because today is one of the most important concepts in all of psychology, which is the science of behavior change. If you want to change your world outside of you, especially for the essence or philosophy of Ashoka, which is to be a change maker, if you want to change the world, you have to be able to change yourselves. Without that, it's going to be very difficult to change the people, places, and structures outside of you. So that is what's at stake here. And this session is going to give you the very basic components of what it takes to bring a new behavior to life in your world, in your community, and your day-to-day routine. And hopefully you can use these tools to make your life incrementally better over time. And so what is this session about? We're going to be going over 5 key questions that hopefully by the end of this 90 minutes, we will have cleanly covered. And if not, we'll have some Q&A at the end where we'll tie up some loose ends together. But the first one is we're going to learn, what is a behavior? What does that even mean? We have to know what we're changing when we're engaging in behavior change. So we're going to talk about where behaviors come from, how they form, and how we can use our understanding of the brain to then change our behaviors moving forward. The next big question is, how do behaviors form? So we all have behaviors. You had the behavior to come to this session today. Some of you have behaviors of drinking your coffee in the morning or brushing your teeth. How does that actually happen? And how can we leverage the knowledge of how that happens to start choosing what behaviors we engage in our lives? Number 3, how do we develop new behaviors? How do we choose behaviors that are good for us? And how do we begin to potentially let go of some behaviors that we would prefer not to have, or we would prefer to be less involved in our lives? Number 4, what are the effective tools for cultivating behaviors? We're going to go over some really simple tips and strategies from the psychological world that are actually very powerful, that don't cost you any money, doesn't require any fancy degrees, that you can start engaging with tomorrow, that will enhance your ability to create great behaviors in your life. And number 5, how to make them stick. Because as we know, all of our New Year's resolutions have probably not worked in the past, and there's a good reason for that. And we're going to talk about why that is and how we can leverage these tools to dramatically improve your chances of success when developing a new behavior, which is our goal for the session. So if that sounds good for everybody, let's jump right in. Maya Angelou famously said, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. It's a really interesting and powerful quote when it comes to behavior change. I'm curious, what's your interpretation of this quote? Someone who maybe we haven't heard of, or who we haven't heard from so far, I'd love to hear your voice. What does this quote mean to you? And it could just be, I have no idea what this quote means. We want to talk about it more, but unmute. I'd love to hear what you think so that we can get our discussion rolling. If you can't change something, or if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. I'd love to hear what you think this quote means. There must be one opinion in the group. I know there's an opinion.
Daniel, we have an opinion in the comments. It's from Fairuz, who says, change starts from us as an individual.
Change starts from us as an individual. I could not agree more. Change begins within. It's a mental construct. It starts with the mind. It starts with your attitude, your belief systems about the world, and then that later downstream becomes the behaviors that you engage in day-to-day life. And this is the philosophy we're going to be engaging in now. So let's begin. Let's just get this whole thing started. I'd like to begin with a question. This is probably the question that gets all of this started, which is likely why you're all here today. And the question is, what is the top behavior that you'd like to develop in your life? And I use the word develop very carefully, and I'll tell you why in just a moment, because we're not actually, I kind of tricked you a little bit. We're not here to change behaviors. We're here to develop new behaviors. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is the top behavior that you would like to develop? Ishan, as our audience is considering what behavior they'd like to develop, can you please put together some breakout rooms? And by the size of our group, let's do groups of 3. And for, let's say, around 5 minutes, let's discuss with your groups of 3 which behavior you would like to begin developing in your life and why. And then by the time our breakout rooms are finished, we'll come back. I'd love to hear from some of you and share what those behaviors are. And then we're going to march right in and start learning the neuroscience of behavior change, so we can begin leveraging this and activating your goals. So Ishan, let's launch those breakout rooms, and I will see you back in the main universe in about 5 minutes. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Base Reality. Thank you for returning. I hope you had some scintillating discussions around your desired behavior development plan and what behaviors you'd like to develop in your life. I would love to hear from a few of our groups what you learned. What are the behaviors that you want to be developing in your life? What did some of your team members mention? Because, and I will put this out there, because every time someone speaks from the group and communicates what their goals are, it inspires everyone else on the call. So it's not just to let your voice be heard, it's actually to inspire others on the call. I know I always feel inspired when others give their voice, their opinions, and what they're working on. So please unmute yourself for the benefit of the group. I would love to hear, what is your desired behavior change that you would like to see in your life? What do you want to work on today? I know you can do this. You can just click the unmute button and inspire the group with your goals.
I'll go. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Claire. Yes, I can see and hear you. Are you calling in from Bhutan?
Oh, I wish I was. I'm pretending I am. My group and I had a great discussion about staying focused on goals and not getting distracted by life, and a lot of discussion about personal well-being and working out and making sure our work-life balance was manageable, not being overwhelmed by things.
Fantastic, Claire. So what I'm hearing is you were talking about kind of making sure that the goals stick. You were talking about things like working out, prioritizing well-being, making sure that you're taking care of yourself, and coming up with a reliable strategy to make sure that that plan actually works.
Totally, spot on.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Claire. I'd love to hear from somebody else. What was your group discussing, and what is the behavior that you would like to develop in your life?
Hello.
Hi, Vivian.
Hi. I have something quite similar to Claire. I think I feel I'm doing a lot of things at the same time, and I would like to be able to focus, be more organized and disciplined, and just like focus on doing one thing at a time. And I feel like sometimes that's because I'm impatient to get everything done, but in the end, I don't get anything done. And then we also have 2 other people in the group. One of them shared that they would like to be more confident, especially in speaking up in a large group like this. She was quite comfortable speaking she's able to speak in the smaller group, but in a large group, it's a bit intimidating. And then another person said that she would like to develop more appreciation for the little things in life. Yeah, and that sometimes we overlook.
Well, first of all, Vivian, I can totally relate to the multitasking thing that happens all the time. There are just 100 things to do. And then when we're doing 100 things, we don't do any of them particularly well. So when it comes to our behavior development goal, we're going to have to stick to one and focus on that one. So I'm totally on the same page. And yes, let's honor the fact that it's scary to let your voice be heard in a group. And this is actually, for those of you who want to work on that, today's a great day to do it, because you have so many people who are rooting for you on this call. And if you want to really commit to that behavior change, to get more confident speaking in a group, give it a try just once in this 90-minute session. I know your heart's probably racing right now thinking about it, but just give it a shot. And I think you may be happy with the results. Thank you, Vivian. These are all fantastic. I'm going to hop back into screen sharing mode, because now that we've considered what it is we want to change in our lives, it's important to understand how behavior change works. And we've got this incredible behavior change machine, which is called the brain. And if you zoom in into the basic cells, the individual units of the brain that comprises this big mass of fat and protein in your head, you would find these little things called neurons. These are the basic units of all communication systems and how electrical energy is transferred between one part of the brain to another. And neurons are built to connect to one another and transmit electrical information, which we then interpret as various forms of data, like sensory information, forming and retaining memories, our instincts, and our creative ideas, coming up with new things that we've never thought of before. These neurons are responsible for transferring that data across different regions of the brain. For those of you who are psychologists in the room, I know I'm vastly oversimplifying this, and you should take an entire course on neuroanatomy so you can understand the true depth and beauty of the brain. But for today, I only have one slide, so this is what we're going to focus on. And it turns out that the behaviors that you engage in life require a certain kind of electrical firing between these neurons. And as these electrical firings are repeated, they get stronger because neurons grow. They're a living thing. So as there's more need for certain electrical information to pass from one side of the brain to the other, more connections are made to facilitate ease in transferring that connection. So it's kind of like, think about if you want faster internet, you can get a fiber optic channel that directly plugs into the main internet line of your country, and your Wi-Fi will be faster. Your brain is neuroplastic, meaning that it's constantly forming to make communication and information transfer faster and more efficient. And it turns out, when you engage in a behavior after about 60 to 90 days, that behavior can become automated because the transfer of information between those neurons becomes so efficient that you no longer have to think about it anymore. So any new thing that you do, if you can repeat that behavior for about 60 to 90 days, it becomes very easy. So think about brushing your teeth. There was a time when you were, 2, 3 years old, when you just rebelled against your parents. You didn't want to brush your teeth. It was the worst thing. You would forget. You would say you didn't want to do it. But now it's just a habit. It's something that you just do. You don't think about brushing your teeth. It's just something that happens before you go to bed at night or when you wake up in the morning, ideally. And if you don't brush your teeth, let's think of another behavior that works for you, but most people are brushing their teeth at least once a day. So that's an automated behavior. Now the question is, how do we take this new behavior, the one that's not automated, like brushing your teeth, and turn it into something that's very easy for you to do, and that's something that regularly happens? We have to allow time for our neurons to change and to form so that that kind of electrical information can transfer in ways that makes that behavior easy and seamless. So here's the thing. If you take one thing out of this course today, it's the next line. What we're doing is not changing behaviors. We are developing new behaviors. So it's not like you can take a behavior that you've been doing for 20 years and then just stop doing it. It doesn't work that way, because remember, you've built the neurological pathways to make that behavior very easy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't expect your brain to just stop doing that. The path has been formed. But what you can do is begin creating a new path, a path that does things a little bit differently. And that path will take time, but once it's formed, the old ways of doing things will be less interesting, and they'll be less efficient, and they'll start to kind of trickle away. And the new ways of doing things will start to become easier and more seamless. So today we're going to be focusing on behavior development and not behavior change. So behavior change is what people commonly talk about, but what we're actually doing is developing a new behavior. So I'm here to bust a big myth. You can't change a behavior, but you can develop a new one on top of the old ones that you already have. So this is something that everyone can do. It's not like you were born with a certain behavior and there's no way that you can get around it. You can always develop new behaviors because your brain is plastic, it's always changing, and you can intentionally create those new neural networks that allow that new behavior to become more seamless. And that's the name of the game. So the question is, how do we do that? It's not easy. This is like the pinnacle of all of psychology, is behavior change. It's getting people to try new things and getting those new things to stick. If any of you have ever attempted a New Year's resolution, you may have been woefully dissatisfied with your massive failure. By a show of hands, for those of you with your screens on, how many of you have ever failed your New Year's resolution? And my hand is up because I have failed my New Year's resolutions. Turns out you're not alone. Because studies show, and there have been many researchers who have studied New Year's resolution success rates, about 6 to 50% of New Year's resolutions actually succeed, meaning 94 to 50% of New Year's resolutions fail, depending on the study. And there are a few great reasons for this. And I'm drawing some of these reasons out of more recent research so we can see what are the challenges and the sticking points where you might have tripped up in the past. And now, what we're going to do, if any of these apply to you, if any of these stumbling blocks have applied to you in the past, I'd like you to raise your hand, either your actual hand or your digital hand. And I'm going to go through them one at a time. I see Vivian's like, all of them. I already know all of them apply to me, but we'll go one at a time so we all know what they mean. Number one, being unprepared. You didn't come into the behavior change with a plan. You just said, starting January 1st, I'm going to start going to the gym, and then you expected that that was just going to happen. You didn't sit down, make a concrete plan, and then execute that plan. How many of you have been unprepared in the past? Raise your hand. I'm definitely one of them. Number two, overcommitted. For those of you who are overzealous, you said to yourselves, not only am I going to go to the gym, but I'm going to eat healthier, I'm going to get to bed earlier, I'm going to drink more water, I'm going to call my mom more, and I'm going to, study for my exams a little bit more effectively, and I'm going to do that all at the same time. So I overcommitted to what I wanted to do. Raise your hand. How many of you have fallen into that trap before? Fantastic. That means you are a 100% human being. And we're going to learn how to get over that in just a second. Number three, how many of you have fallen into the trap of multitasking? I'm going to do 100 things at the same time, and I'm not going to do any of them particularly well. So not only am I going to be focused on behavior change, but I'm going to be doing 50 other things at the same time. Raise your hand if you've fallen into the trap of multitasking. Fantastic. We have all humans on this call. Wonderful. The fourth one is a really interesting one, and it's one that's often ignored. Superficiality is when we go into a behavior change goal or a behavior development goal without understanding why we're doing it. It may be because our parents wanted us to do it, or our doctor told us we had to do it, or we felt compelled because society implied that we needed to do it. But it wasn't coming really internally. We didn't really reach down and understand what is the value system that's driving this behavior development. And so we just engaged in it because we felt like we had to, rather than because it's something we really wanted to do. How many of you have fell into the superficiality trap? I see almost everybody on the call. This happens all the time. The fifth trap, the negativity bias. If you have a brain, you have bias. And the negativity bias is one of the most powerful ones. If we make a mistake, if we mess up, if we miss our behavior development goals, what's the first thing that happens? You start thinking, I'm not good at this. This isn't working. This isn't for me. I can't do this. The brain starts going into negativity overdrive, and you just convince yourself that it's not going to happen. How many of you have self-sabotaged because of the negativity bias, which is the most common human bias, by the way? Phenomenal. Again, all human beings on the call. And last one is fixed mindset. This is the trap where we convince ourselves that we just weren't born to do this new behavior change thing, right? Like, let's say you commit to going to the gym for 30 minutes a day, and then you fail, and then you tell yourself, well, I'm just not a gym person. You know, some people are born with bodies that are good at physical activity, and mine's just not one of those. So, you know, genetics was not in my favor on this one. It's not going to work. Instead of growth mindset, which we'll talk about in a second, which is I can learn, I can grow, I can do it better, I can learn from this mistake. How many of you have ever fallen into the fixed mindset trap? I see the hands have literally never gone down. So these are the 6 most common traps we fall into when we're trying to engage in new behavior changes. So the question is, what are the antidotes? And this is what we're going to be working on today. Number 1, we're going to develop a plan. You are not going to go into this unprepared. You're going to have a strategy and you're going to execute that strategy. Number 2, we're going to work on achievable goals. We're not going to do 100 things at the same time. We're going to focus on one achievable, focused goal and then move forward in making sure that we can do it. Number 3, we're going to monotask, not multitask. That means focusing on one behavior change goal at a time. Number 4, we're going to connect to the deeper meaning of why this goal matters, understanding our value systems, understanding why this is important, our intrinsic motivation, so that when we begin engaging in it, it means something to us and it has depth. Number 5, we're going to learn a little bit about self-compassion, because I promise you, this is a guarantee. When you're learning a new behavior, you will fail. It's not going to work out every single time. So you need to know what you're going to do when it does fail. So you have to program that into the plan, recognize that failure is inevitable, and that when you fail, you're going to use it as a learning opportunity, which brings us to number 6, cultivating a growth mindset, which is the radical belief that you can change. And I have all the science in the world that can prove it, but unless you believe it, it's not going to happen. Believing that, yes, you can get better at this. All it takes is practice, it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes repetition. And if you continue to do it over and over again, you will get better at it and it will become an automated behavior. So last show of hands, how many of you are committed to working with me today on overcoming these 6 traps and working on these 6 things to make your behavior change plan successful? Raise your hand. Fantastic. That's what we're going to do today. If you're committed, I'm committed. So let's do this together. Now, let's start talking about some really simple strategies that you can deploy starting today. And actually, we have a great workbook that we're going to be working on together as we move forward. And Ishan is going to send that off in just a second. I think it's on the next slide. But before we do, I want to arm you with some tools that you can deploy to increase the success rates of your behavior development goals. And this is coming straight from research. These are the 6 most powerful and effective ways of helping implement your behavior change goals. So when we go through this workbook together and I ask you, what are some strategies that you're going to deploy, some specific monotasking strategies, you can choose from these, or you can choose from your own that you feel may work for you. But I want to arm you with some tools before we launch into our discussion. So the first one, and you're not going to believe this, but a few of the studies that I looked at shows that there's an 80% increase in success rate in behavior development goals when we simply meet with someone who will keep us accountable to those behavior changes. So if we have a partner or someone who we can work with that we can check in with on a periodic basis, and they ask us one simple question: how's it been going? You said you wanted to go to the gym. How many times have you gone to the gym this week? If you make an appointment with someone who checks in on your behavior development goal, it may increase your success rate in that goal up to 80%, according to studies. Second thing, and you're going to start seeing a pattern here, group support. And this is where our Zoom call comes in handy, because now you have about, how many people on this call? Close to 30 who are now invested in behavior development change. So if you have a group of people who are working on a similar behavior development goal, you have, let's say, 3 or 4 people who want to go to the gym, 3 or 4 people who want to eat healthier, 3 or 4 people who want to sleep better. Meet with them, start a WhatsApp chat group, start to connect with them and trade strategies. Just by having people in your network that are working on the same thing keeps everyone accountable within that group and gets everybody excited to succeed, and it can increase your success rates up to 62%, according to research. Next one, having an accountability buddy. If you don't have a whole group, get one person. And that one person doesn't even need to be working on a behavior development goal. They just need to keep you accountable. So it's somebody that you check in on, somebody who maybe sends you a message every now and again, hey, how's that gym goal doing? Can actually improve your success rate up to 42%. So the accountability partner becomes critical. Look at all the names on this call right now. Your accountability partner is in here somewhere, and your goal is to find them by the end of this session. Number 4, having a daily goal writing practice. So simply taking 30 to 60 seconds at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, or after you do your behavior change goal for that day, sit down and write about it. Or if you forget to do it, write about that you forgot to do it. And what that does is it starts reinforcing that behavior on a daily basis, and it tells your brain this is important. This is something that needs to be done. And along with goal writing, tracking your habits is also extremely important. We have one of the greatest habit trackers in the history of human innovation, which is your smartphone. It's got a great feature called the calendar. And if you set some reminders that allows you to track how you're doing your habits, whether you're doing them or not, can increase your success rates up to 36%. And then lastly, setting those reminders on a daily basis. Let's say you aim to meditate in the morning, setting a reminder where your alarm pings at 6:30 in the morning whenever you want to meditate, can help you engage in that behavior up to 12% more than if you didn't set a reminder. So these are 6 really awesome strategies and tools. They don't cost any money. You don't need to download any special or fancy apps. Many of them rely on community and friendships and people who can help you keep accountable, and they have massive impacts on the success rates. So pick a few of those, think of some that really resonate for you, and consider potentially deploying them in your strategy today. George Bernard Shaw said, he's a famous American author, he said, progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. I'm curious to hear from the group, either in chat or taking yourself off mute. What did George Bernard Shaw mean by this? Now that you know a little bit more about what behavior change and behavior development means, when he says progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. I'd love to hear what you think this quote means for you now that we've learned some of these things together on our call. Please unmute or send something in the chat and Ishan will read it aloud. And for those of you who are working on your speaking in public courage, this is your opportunity to practice.
We've got a comment from Aiden who says, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got.
Aiden from Tatooine, I could not have said that better myself. If you continue to do what you do, you're just reinforcing the old, and you're not trying something new. So you're just reinforcing the neural pathways that you've already created. So you cannot create anything new on the outside if you cannot create anything new on the inside. Thank you so much, Aiden. I appreciate that perspective. Now, before we launch into our behavior development workbook, there's one more thing that we have to review, and it's how to develop an effective plan. And for behavior development, we use the SMART strategy. For those of you in occupational management, you may have heard this before, and we're applying this to behavior change. There are many, many research papers that show that setting SMART goals can dramatically increase the odds that your behavior development plan will be successful. So we're going to go over those today, and this becomes the framework of our workbook. SMART is an acronym in behavior change that stands for 5 key components to making sure that whatever you're setting out to do is achievable and can be done effectively. The S stands for specific, meaning when we're setting a behavior development goal, we want it to be a direct, detailed, and meaningful goal, not something broad. For example, a broad goal might look like, I want to have greater well-being. That's not specific enough. We have to get really specific and say, I want to eat 5 servings of fruits and veggies a day, or I want to get exactly 8 hours of sleep a night, or I want to get in 20 hours of cardio every afternoon. So having a very specific goal rather than a broad goal is going to help us achieve that much more effectively. Making sure that your goal is measurable is the second thing. So I gave a few examples when I was talking about specific, but let's say instead of saying, I'm going to run every day, how long are you going to run? How far are you going to run? Are you going to track your heart rate? Do you want your heart rate to get up to a specific number? So making sure that whatever you're doing is trackable and measurable, that there's some numerical value associated with that, even if it's just I did it or I didn't do it, makes the thing measurable. And that's going to improve the odds that you're going to make it happen. The third one, making sure it's attainable, not some giant thing like, oh, I'm gonna run a marathon next week, and I've never ran before in my life. That's not very attainable. Let's try something that's a little bit more incremental. Every day, I'm gonna run for 5 minutes for 1 week, and then the next week, I'm gonna do 10 minutes. And then the week after that, I'm gonna do 15 minutes. And every week, I'm gonna kick it up by 5 minutes in these little attainable bite-sized chunks so that it's easy for me to succeed. So attainability is about making things easy for you to succeed. The fourth one is relevant, making sure that what you're doing aligns with your personal values. It's got to be relevant to you and what you want to achieve in your life and what your goals are in your life. It's not what your parents want, what your family wants, what society wants. It's what means something to you. So making sure that you tether that to a personal value so we activate intrinsic motivation. And then lastly, making sure your goal has a deadline. Give yourself about 3 to 6 months to make it work, and then make sure that by the end of those 3 to 6 months, you've achieved that goal. Because if you just say, I'm gonna run every day, and you don't give it a timeline, 6 months from now, you'll be like, oh, I'll start it tomorrow. And then 6 months later, you'll say, oh, I'll start it tomorrow. Give yourself a deadline, and then you'll be much more likely to achieve it. Is everyone good with the SMART goals? Any questions on these before we launch into our workbook? I'll take a pause, raise your hand, let me know if any of this is confusing, and if so, I'll clarify. And if not, we're going to launch into our workbook part of our session. So I'll pause. Any questions? Feel free to add your questions in the chat or practice your public speaking courage by asking in the group. And if there are none,
we
yes,
have
Sean?
a question from Jessica who asks, what's the difference between accountability appointments and an accountability partner?
Yeah, so an accountability appointment would be kind of a reliable check-in that you have on a weekly basis with someone. So it's a scheduled event that you go to or you have a phone call on. An accountability partner is a little bit more casual. It's somebody who like sends you a casual message every now and again, like, how's that going? Or, hey, did you go for a run yesterday? So it's not so scheduled, but it's still keeping you accountable. It's keeping you keeping the task on the front of your mind. So they're similar, but they have different outcomes. One is a scheduled event, the other is more casual.
Next,
any other questions?
Nico wants to know, how do you differentiate behaviors and habits, or do you use these interchangeably?
They're very similar. A behavior is much more broad. It's just something that you do. I have a glass of water here. So if you watch me drink this water, that's a behavior. I just drank the water. A habit is a behavior that happens reliably, usually under the level of our consciousness. So if I were an obsessive water drinker, I would have a habit of always drinking water and constantly taking sips. So behavior is basically anything that you do, and a habit is a reliable behavior. Does that make sense? Fantastic. Any other questions?
Daniel, do you differentiate between development and adaptation?
Development and adaptation. Well, I guess it depends on how you define them, if you want me to get super nerdy about it. But when I'm talking about development, it's building something new, it's creating something. And from a psychological perspective, we're talking about habits and behaviors. If we talk about adaptation, what that would usually imply is that it serves a purpose to make our lives easier or better, or to help us function more effectively in the context of our environment. So like an adaptation may be, I develop a healthy habit for, let's say meditating, because it helps me stay focused at work. So you're developing something, yes, and that's adaptive because it makes you better in the context that you're in.
Super, thanks.
Sure, thanks for the question. It was a good one. All right, if there are no more questions, then Ishan, can you please send off our workbook for the day? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that everybody has an opportunity to open up their workbook. And this is what we're going to be working on for the rest of the session. It's a PDF guide that I've created for all of you. And it's actually editable. So it's an interactive guide that you can edit right now and fill out during this call. Let me know if you have any problems or issues opening the file and using it. It really doesn't matter. You can use your notepad or a Word doc or a Google Doc or something like that. You don't have to use this guide, but this is just a convenient way to get our plan in place. And this is where the plan is initially going to go. Now, there are 6 major parts of this workbook. And so I would like to ask, before we even start, before you know what you're getting yourselves into, 6 volunteers to help work through each of these 6 sections. And you'll be working directly with me on one of those 6 sessions. So if I have 6 brave volunteers to work with me on this call while everybody works on the back end on their own, please raise your hand. And Ishan will take down those 6 names and we will call on you one by one. So we have Vivian, we have Varis, we have Namita. Is that 3 so far? We have Grace, we've got 4, we need 2 more. Who's working on your courage? Ashvinder, and last one. And Nico. Thank you, everyone. Ishan, did you get those names down?
Yes, I've noted them down.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we have to find the bravest of our brave volunteers, because what I would love for everyone to do is open up your workbook to page 3, and I will be sharing my screen so that we can all follow along together. Your workbook should look something like this. On page 3, we're now going to go through SMART goals for you to take that behavior change or your behavior development goal that you decided on at the very beginning of our course. And now we're going to start creating an action plan based on the SMART goals. And we're going to start with step 1, which is to create a specific goal. We're going to specify. So among our 6 volunteers, who would like to go first to start coming up with some ideas on creating specific goals for your behavior development plan? Who's first? And Ishan, if you can support me in watching for hands, I see.
Yes, I see Varis's hand up.
Okay, fantastic. And Varis, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, Varis, that's correct. Yeah.
Wonderful. So Varis, I'm curious to hear from you. What behavior would you like to develop in your life? What's the thing that we're working on?
Drinking more water.
You want to drink more water. Great.
Yes. So to be specific, I want to drink 2 liters of water daily.
You want to drink 2 liters of water daily. So
yes.
That's really, really well done, Varis. So you chose a quantity, which is 2 liters, and you also chose a frequency, which is daily. So that's very easy for me to picture in my mind. I know exactly what you're going to be doing every day with that goal. So that's a really nice, specific goal. What I also liked about that, Varis, is that you framed it in the positive. You said, I would like to drink 2 liters of water daily, instead of saying something like, I don't want to forget to drink water, which is framing it in the negative. Because the subconscious mind doesn't do well with negatives. So if you say, I want to quit drinking or quit smoking, the subconscious mind doesn't really hear that very well. And it needs to hear something more positive. I want to be alcohol free. I want to be smoke free. I want to get 20 minutes of exercise in a day. So really well done in the positive framing, really great work with those specific goals. So what I'll ask everyone to do is come up with some very specific goals that you can begin to work on right away. Think of quantities, think of amount of time, think of frequency, and get really specific. Where are you going to do it? What are you going to be doing? Who are you going to be involved with? As the more details you can add to this, the higher the chances that it's going to work. So I'm going to pause for about 2 minutes and let everyone start to fill in their step one very specific strategies. And if you have any questions that come up along the way, please just raise your hand or write it into the chat. Ishan will catch it and we'll work on it in real time. So I will pause for 2 minutes and let everybody jot down some ideas for a specific behavior development goal.
Daniel, we have a question from Jarvis.
Yep.
He wants to know, what if it is a behavior that is not measurable somehow? For instance, to be a better listener or an effective communicator?
All behaviors are measurable. We can quantify anything in psychology. So, so Jarvis, if you want to be a better listener, so that's kind of a broader goal. We can actually make that more specific and say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes a day, 1 minute with a different person, and I'm going to sit and listen to them carefully without speaking. So you're saying I'm going to do this for 5 minutes and break it up into 1 minute chunks, each with a different person. And you're saying exactly the behavior that you're going to do. You're going to sit quietly and you're going to listen completely to what they have to say to you. So that's an example of how you can take, I want to be a better listener, and make it more specific. Those are actually all quantifiable as well, because you can measure a minute, and you can even start to quantify whether the person felt that you were listening to them or not. You can ask them, do you feel heard? And if they say yes, then you know that you're starting to build that behavior around being a good listener. So these are all ways that you can begin to quantify and make that more specific. Jarvis, is that helpful? Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I think I will try it tomorrow because I'm meeting a friend. So I hope whatever he's sharing, I'm able to address his concerns. So that makes me a good listener and an effective communicator. If he doesn't keep coming back to me and ask me, or repeatedly saying the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Awesome, Jarvis. And if I may make a recommendation, I heard 2 different types of behaviors there. One is to be an effective listener, and the other one is a better communicator. So without falling into the trap of multitasking, I may commit to one of those first. So pick one of the 2 that you want to work on in the near term and focus on that. And it may be that, good listening might be more important to you right now. So you would pick being a good listener, and you can even tell your friends, you can say, let's say it was Ishan, I'm working on being a better listener. And I know that you have something that you'd like to share with me. And what I'd like to do is listen as carefully as possible. And afterwards, I'd like to know how I did in being a better listener. Would you be able to give me that feedback? So you can tell your friends that this is something that you're working on. And most people will be very happy to help you with that. Obviously, if it's not appropriate, you don't have to do it that way. But I would say 90% of people would probably be pretty thrilled to support you with that.
I always thought that both attributes come hand in hand. In order to be a good communicator, first of all, you have to listen to know what potentially could be the issue and everything. That's why I was trying to do these 2 together, to help me potentially improve my comm skills. Yeah, because sometimes I realized I didn't listen carefully. And then when I start communicating, it's off track, or people don't understand me, or like I wasn't into the topic. So I link back to the fact that I wasn't a good listener. So it's just something that I'm trying to understand myself better. Yeah.
That's perfect, Jarvis. So it sounds like there's this overall blanket of wanting to be a better communicator. One component of that is being a better listener. And so you can figure out what all those components are and focus on those one at a time until you achieve the entire umbrella. And then I guarantee if you do, let's say, listening, body language, articulation, presence, all of that stuff, if you focus on those one at a time, after a year, you're going to be an awesome communicator.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jarvis. Okay, Sean, who's our second participant?
Oh, okay, Dan, sorry, we have one more question. Do you want to address it now, or?
What's the question?
The question was from Shreya. How would you quantify something like improving sitting posture?
Improving sitting posture. Okay, so let's actually get to step 2. Ishan, can we table this until right after we do the step 2 measurement part? Because this is the quantification part. And,
Yes, sure.
and then I'll address that one. So who is our brave volunteer who's going to be doing the measurement piece?
I can do that.
Hi, Namita. Thank you for volunteering. So I'm curious, what behavior development are you interested in accomplishing, and how do you want to measure it?
Okay, I'm interested in accomplishing filing all my loose documents.
That's great. That's a great goal. And tell me, how are you going to measure success as you do that?
So I'm going to spend 30 minutes every day of filing. And so the measure, so I am struggling with the measure. So I need to put some kind of rule of saying I need to have filed 3 cases every day.
Yep.
And that's my measure.
Now we're talking. That's great, Namita. So your overall goal is to file all your stuff. So you've got all this stuff, you've got to file it. There are many ways that you can measure that. And I'll address a little bit of our question too. Every single behavior can be measured. At the very basic root of measurement is you either did it or you didn't. So it might be, meditating for 5 minutes a day. You either did it or you didn't do it, and that can be measured. It's a 1 or a 0. You can then go a little bit more in detail. So Namita, you have a certain quantity of stuff that you want to file, and you could potentially break that up into percentages. And you can commit that every day you're going to spend 30 minutes, and by the end of those 30 minutes, you will have filed 5% of the remaining pile. So you can start breaking it up into chunks and committing to filing a certain percentage of those chunks within a certain period of time, in a certain frequency, which is daily. Does that make sense? So now you know very, very clearly, when I wake up today, I'm going to spend 30 minutes. I'm going to take 5% of the stack and I'm going to file it. And then I'm going to track whether I've done that or not. And I'll keep track of that behavior over time. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
That's a highly measurable behavior. Really well done. And Ishan, can you remind me of the question again from our audience member?
Yes, Daniel. The question was, how would you quantify something like improving sitting posture?
Improving sitting posture. That's great. So here's one idea. You can set a reminder on your phone that pings every 30 minutes when you're sitting down and working on something. And that reminder is meant to trigger something in your brain to check on your sitting posture. And you're going to keep a tally when that thing pings. You're going to look at your sitting posture and you're going to mark down whether it was a healthy sitting posture or whether it was an unhealthy sitting posture. And then over time, you're going to measure the percent of times that you had a healthy sitting posture versus an unhealthy sitting posture. So that's also a highly measurable behavior. Fantastic. So for those of you who are working in your workbook, take 2 minutes now and write down some ideas for measurement. How are you going to keep track of your progress? How do you know when your behavior change is successful? How are you going to keep track of this thing over time? So one of the ways to frame this is success equals, and then write down what success equals. So if you want to get more aerobic exercise, as an example, I have a fitness tracker that I wear, and when I get aerobic exercise, I watch my heart rate, and when it gets to 60% maximum, I keep that up for 20 minutes, and then I know that my aerobic exercise is complete for the day. So think of really clear ways that you can measure it. So we'll take about 1 minute and 30 seconds now and finish this section.
Daniel, we have a question from Yolani about measurement, about how about something like being more positive and actively bringing energy into group conversations?
Sure, being more positive. So that's a pretty broad behavior. We may want to get that more specific. So for example, how do you want to be more positive and in what situations? So let's say I want to be more accepting of when people are upset with me. So that's one version of being positive that's a little bit more specific. Or you may want to say, I want to be more creative in my workplace with my employees. I want to take more time for creativity. So positivity can mean many things. So getting really specific about particular interactions that lead to positivity, or whatever positivity means to you, is step one. So getting really specific. And then let's say positivity means to you being accepting of others when they're upset with you. You would basically start keeping track of situations of conflict, and then, you know, letting the person know, hey, I'm actually working on being more positive and accepting, and I understand that you're upset with me right now, and I care about you, and I care about our relationship, and I'd like to work this out with you. And you can actually track whether or not you were accepting of that situation. And it's either a yes or a no, 1 or a 0. And then you can see over time what percentage of those situations you were positive. So that's just an example. So I would come up with a very specific version of what positivity means for you, and then basically come up with your measurement system of whether you do it in that situation or not over time. You can set reminders and do things like that so that you can keep track of those situations. Okay, fantastic. Great work, everyone. We're really moving on here. Who is our third volunteer where we can work on an attainable goal rather than just some giant mountain goal? Looks like Nico's excited about this one. Nico, I'm curious, what is your behavior? What do you want to create in your life?
Right, I put here, write or revise a poem once a week.
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Nico?
Sorry. Write or revise a poem once a week.
Write or revise a poem once a week. That's wonderful. It's very specific. You're writing or revising, so you get to choose one of the two. You have a frequency, it's once a week, so you can do it anytime. You may want to get more specific. You may be more creative in the afternoon. You can set a time that allows you to write or revise the poem. It's important to check in. Is this goal attainable for you? Based on your schedule, and how long it typically takes you to write or revise a poem, is that feasible for you to do once a week? Do you feel like that's easy for you?
I think that's why I put, I think before yesterday I wouldn't have done it, but yesterday I attended this writers community that was just self-organized, and they meet every week. And the product is like a poem or a draft of a poem. And so I attended for the first time yesterday, and I found it, I don't know, effective. So it seems like if I did this earlier, I wouldn't have come up with this goal. But now that I've attended one of the sessions, I feel like that I can make this a goal. So my step 3 is just to commit to attending that weekly, so that I can progress in my goals.
That's fantastic. And that's an accountability group, because you're going to this session where you're checking in on, the poetry that you're writing or revising. So you're already setting the stakes in your advantage. And now the only thing is to check in whether you have enough time for this, which it sounds like you do. And that sounds very reasonable. One poem or one revision once a week. And Nico, how long does it usually take you to write or revise a poem?
We're given an hour in that session. So it's also a practice of just accepting whatever you come up with. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, right? Fantastic.
Well, that's one great way to make this attainable, is to set a time boundary and say, I'll work on this for 60 minutes, because who knows, you may need 3 or 4 hours one day to write this new incredible poem, like some massive Chaucer style novel, which you may not have time for, which would not be attainable. So giving yourself a set amount of time makes this more attainable. You can commit to 30 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever that is. So that sounds very reasonable. And for everyone else on our call, think of how you can make it as bite-sized as possible. Instead of jumping in and saying, I'm going to spend 2 hours at the gym every day, consider 10 minutes to start, or 20 minutes to start. I'm going to exercise for 20 minutes. And then every week I may increase that by 5 minutes until I reach my 1 hour goal. So make it really easy. What is the easiest way that you can make this succeed for yourself? How can you make this as bite-sized and consumable as humanly possible? And I promise you, you will thank yourself for doing it, because it just becomes effortless when you take baby steps towards your goal. So we'll take a pause for another 1.5 minutes, where you can write down some ideas on how you can make your goal as bite-sized and easy to attain as possible. Okay, Sean, who is our next brave volunteer to help us with the relevance piece?
I see Vivian's hand up.
Vivian, thank you for volunteering. Vivian, what is the behavior that you'd like to develop in your life?
It's actually also writing. So the goal I set is to write at least 500 words every morning.
Wonderful. That's great. That's an audacious goal. I like that. And are you writing a novel, or is this just for personal enjoyment?
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. So 500 words every morning, and you may want to block out a time. You may want to say, I'm going to spend 1 hour writing 500 words, or however long that takes you. So let's make this relevant, because it's one thing where, let's say your entire family is a family of writers and they want you to be a writer too. So you feel compelled to do this because your family wants you to do this. It's another thing if writing is important to you because of the values that you have and your experience with writing. So I'm curious, why is writing important to you on an intrinsic level?
So the three values that I identified for this particular goal is authenticity, clarity, and connection. I feel like authenticity is really important to me, and that relates to clarity. And I think writing helps me find clarity, like organize my thoughts, so that I can show up like more as myself authentically. And it also helps me connect with others. If I can write clearly, then I can share it and that people can actually understand. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I heard authenticity, clarity, and connection. Is that right?
Yes.
So those three values are very important to you in your life, and writing helps facilitate those values. Wonderful. That's incredible. So that sounds like really powerful intrinsic motivation that's in alignment with your values, that will kind of be the fuel that keeps this thing moving. So another example that I give of a goal that may not be in alignment with your values is somebody who says, oh, I'm going to exercise because my doctor told me I need to. That's not really in alignment with values. But once you frame it as, I value quality time with my family, and if I exercise for 20 minutes a day, I'll have more time on earth with my family. Whoa, do you feel the difference between those two? Completely night and day. So we want to be able to link this to something that's important to us. And Vivian, you nailed it. Really well done. Thank you. So let's take another minute and 30 seconds to fill out the step 4 part, where you're identifying core values, just like Vivian did. She named 3 core values: authenticity, clarity, and connection. You may have different words. And then write about how those value words are related to this behavior change, or how this behavior development goal is going to help you be in alignment with those values.
Daniel, we have a question about step 3 in this time. It's about how would you frame getting rid of a habit? Example, being social media free while I'm working. Should the attain step be about coming up with new behaviors to replace the social media use?
100%, you nailed it. Instead of saying what you don't want to do, say what you do want to do. So one way to frame it would be, when I feel compelled to go on social media, I will fill in the blank, do 20 jumping jacks, go out in nature for a walk, eat broccoli, whatever that is for you. So what is your replacement behavior when you feel compelled to go on social media? So always focus on what you do want to do instead of what you don't want to do, and the behavior will be much more successful. Great question, thank you. Ishan, who is our brave volunteer for step 5?
So we have Grace or Ashwinder left. Which one of you would like to go first?
Go hey. Oh, Ashwinder, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me all right, Ishan?
Yeah, perfect. Please go
Hi,
ahead.
Ashwinder. Thank you for volunteering.
Hi.
What is the behavior you want to develop?
For myself, it's around, very specifically around exploring career options in the technology sector beyond my current role that I have. And how I'm going to do that is really to network with 2 new connections every month, and then kind of keep those connections live at least once a month. So that's kind of my overall goal.
That's awesome. So
yeah.
How will you know when this overall goal is completed? Is it a certain number of connections? Like when I have 200 connections, I know that I'll have achieved my goal?
No, I don't, as long as I'm meeting new people and trying to keep to that goal of meeting new people and keeping those connections as close as possible for the next 6 months, I will be wanting to gather all those learnings, what areas I'm interested in, what areas I'm not interested in, whether I've made some deeper connections beyond just surface level, and I give myself 6 months to do that. So at the end of the 180-day mark, or maybe by the end of this 20th year of 2021, I will then call an end to the task and make some decisions about, okay, now what's next. I've done the exercise of exploring, making new connections. I've learned this much. Now I have to either apply or make a decision to, like, okay, this is the roles I want to go for next. So that's how I kind of see the end of it.
Ashvinder, that's great. And you answered the question very skillfully, that you're going to give yourself 6 months to do this. That's your deadline. And you're going to start building this new muscle of making new connections on a certain cadence, whether that's daily or weekly or whatever that looks like for you. And then after this 6 months, that may be a part of your behavior system now. You're just always wanting to connect, and hopefully you can keep that up until you are 1 degree away from every person on Earth.
I don't know about that, but thanks, Daniel.
I think I have faith in you. I have faith in your connection abilities. But that's great. You've given yourself a deadline of 6 months. And for those of you working on your own personal behavior change, timeliness and the previous, actually two before, timeliness and attainability work hand in hand, because attainability is how quickly you want to ramp up the strategy. And then timeliness is the amount of time it's going to take you to get to the maximum ramp up. Right? So again, going to the gym, I'm going to start with 20 minutes of exercise a day, and then I want to eventually get to 2 hours a day. So 2 hours is the end goal, and then I'll increase it by a few minutes a day, and then I'll give myself 6 months to get to that maximum goal of 2 hours a day. So think about what your deadline is, and then that's going to be your time-bound behavior development strategy. So take another minute, fill in this part. This may be relatively easy for everybody to give yourselves a deadline. And I typically recommend something between 80 and 180 days to allow for those neural connections to develop. And so that, after 180 days, you can start focusing on a new behavior.
Daniel, we have HT who would like to know if the picture of a bicep on your desktop is indeed your own.
Yeah, this one, yeah, that is an artist rendering of my actual bicep. It was very much interpreted. No, this is an image that I was using to build out another Science of Wellbeing course, where we're talking about the strength of psychological resilience. And if you build up the resilience of your mind, it's like going to the gym and lifting weights to get strong biceps. So sometimes you'll see all kinds of weird icons on my desktop because I'm building other positive psychology presentations. So someday maybe my bicep will look like that, though I doubt it. Thanks for the good question. Okay, who is our 6th and final brave volunteer for managing success and failure?
And that's Grace.
Grace, thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You have a very appropriate name for this section. Managing success and failure with Grace.
Right.
Grace, what is the behavior that you would like to develop in your life?
A more breathable schedule.
A more breathable schedule. And can you tell me specifically what you'd like to accomplish?
4 hours of work meetings a day, max.
4 hours. I'm guessing that the other time will be spacious time for you to do whatever it is that.
Yeah, like other work, thinking time, preparing for those 4 hours of meetings.
Okay, fantastic. So I imagine you have a very busy job and there's a lot of demand for your time. People want to have meetings with you all the time. And I'm guessing there are probably a lot of ASAP meetings that come up from time to time. People kind of infringing on your schedule. So my question is, As you're building up this new behavior, you will fail. I'm going to promise you that, and I'll promise every person on this call you're going to fail. There will be a day when somebody's going to say, you have to have this 30-minute meeting, and that's above and beyond the 4 hours that you've committed, and you'll feel compelled to do it. And you'll come back and you'll say, okay, I didn't get my just 4-hour limit in today. I had to push in a little bit more. So my question to you is, how are you going to manage that? Are you going to give up? Are you going to be down on yourself? Are you going to, tell yourself that you can't do this, or your work just can't accommodate your goals? Or are you going to do something else? Are you going to operate with optimism, growth mindset, and get back up and try again? What specifically are you going to do to manage failure when it happens?
I think I'll tell myself that I can afford to be flexible.
And that you can afford to be flexible.
Yeah.
That's great. So you have the time. So you're coming from an abundance mindset. And then what can you do to tell yourself how you can do it better next time? Next time I'm going to do this to defend my time even more.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that specific action, right? We were just reflecting upon how I responded in that situation. Yes. And like what can change so that, be it the situation that caused me to have such a busy schedule happened, and then try to preemptively prevent that. Or exactly. Yeah.
So we want to have preemptive strategies so that when people start encroaching on your time, you have a plan in place to make sure that you can defend your time as much as possible. And here's another question. How are you going to savor your successes when you are successful at defending your work day so that you only have 4 hours of work meetings? How are you going to celebrate?
By feeling rested.
Just the intrinsic feeling of not having 4 hours of meetings.
Do you have a suggestion? I don't know, actually.
I mean, it could be anything. What really excites you or motivates you? I mean, one thing that I love to do when I succeed at something, I go get myself an ice cream. And I love coconut ice cream, which is why my bicep doesn't look like the bicep in that photo. But yours may be something else, like I'll go for a walk in nature, or I'll treat myself to my favorite restaurant, or I will take time to watch a movie that I haven't watched in a long time that I love. Something that really is a treat for you that you can use to reward yourself.
I think that's interesting. Finding a reward, but I don't know, is there a way to rewire myself to just understand or to really savor the fact that the rest is the reward? Because I think I don't really want to have another thing to do, but to really appreciate and embrace the fact that I'm not doing anything, and that's awesome.
That's great. You can absolutely do that. So you can say, I will take a moment in silence to savor the fact that I'm doing nothing. And that's the reward in and of itself.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank you, Grace, for helping us deal with these things gracefully. And for everyone else on the call, write down some specific strategies for how you're going to manage inevitable failure when you don't go to the gym, when you don't eat your broccoli, when you forget to drink your water, when you let others encroach on your time, when you forget to write your poem. How are you going to get back up and try again? And then secondly, how are you going to treat yourself when you succeed so that you're constantly rewarding yourself for a job well done? So we'll take 1 minute, jot down some ideas, and we will finalize your workbook.
Daniel, Susanna wanted to know, how can those on shift work with an unpredictable schedule effectively use the SMART framework?
For someone with an unpredictable schedule?
Yes.
Sure. Maybe you can give me a more specific example. So what I'm hearing is that maybe day to day, you don't really know what your schedule is going to be. So it's difficult.
She meant people who work different shifts.
Different shifts. And you don't know when you're going to be working those shifts. It's kind of random. Is that right?
Maybe I can elaborate on that. Thank you for your this workshop so far. I guess it's more of like for doctors, for example, pilots, nurses, and even mothers who have young kids, and kids are very unpredictable, and it's really difficult to implement a routine using the SMART framework as well. So maybe some tips on for somebody like that.
I got it, Susanna. Thank you. The recommendation is your daily routine may be not very predictable, but as you zoom out on your timeline, there tends to be predictability on larger scales. So I'll give you an example. Instead of being able to commit to something every day, you may be able to commit to something once a week, or you may be able to commit to something once a month, or you may be able to commit to something once a quarter. So as you zoom out and you get lower resolution on your time scale, you tend to be able to find patterns of predictability within that higher resolution lens. So, you know, instead of a daily behavior, you may want to make it a monthly behavior, something that timeline. So that's one way to kind of get around a busy and randomized schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Fantastic, everyone. You're doing awesome. Our workbook, and this is one of the more important parts. So this is something that you're going to take with you as you continue your behavior development plan. And before signing off, I'd like you to commit to 3 things. Number 1, I will engage in only one behavior change at a time. So you're going to be monotasking. So you're just going to be focusing on this behavior for the next period of time. Number 2, I'm going to be kind to myself when I make a mistake. So I'm going to work on kindness. I'm going to work on positive self-talk, because you will make mistakes, and that's your plan for managing those mistakes. And number 3, I understand that failure is an inevitable part of the learning process, and I'm going to grow as a result of it. So make those 3 commitments, and if you can, sign your name, write the date, and you have now completed your behavior change workbook, which you can return to at any time, make modifications, or remind yourself what your commitments are. So I will pause there because we're closing in to the end of our time. Actually, I'm going to switch back for just one review, just an overview of all of our slides today. I'm just managing the screen share and full screen mode on my slides. Here we go. So today, we learned a lot. I know that was like drinking through a fire hose, but at the end of the day, you have the power to forge new neural pathways in your brain. You have that ability. You can do it. You have to know what you want to do. So you have to be able to skillfully choose your behaviors and get specific about them. And now you have the tools and the framework to plan your development strategy, to know what to do with those goals over time. And from this toolkit that you can deploy over time, you can begin to understand your intrinsic motivation and your values and the behaviors that can spring forth from them. So planting those small seeds early on, starting today, can 6 months from now lead to a new behavior that can radically change your life and make it better. And I hope that this simple 90-minute session has at least done no harm, but at most given you some inspiration and some ideas on how you can radically change your life and start taking on new behaviors that can make things just a little bit better. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time and attention on this call, and I'll stick around for a few minutes in case you have any questions about our content today. Big hugs from Bali, and best of luck with all your behavior change goals. Send me a message every now and again and let me know how you're doing. And if you need an accountability partner, you're looking at them all in this call right now. Thanks, everyone. Take care and have a good day.